Hi, I'm Will.
I'm Jamie.
Jamie, we are here in your shop at M5, and there's tons and tons of amazing looking boxes with interesting labels like oil clay on the shelves behind us. But I think the shelves are cooler than everything that's on the wall put together.
These shelves are, they're surprising what they can do. They're made out of this stock here. It's 1-inch square steel tubing. And there's a reason that I have stacks and stacks of it. These shelves, for example, they're about 20 feet high and they go about 80 feet back in the shop. And I'd say it took me about 3 days with a helper to put these together, to build them from scratch at a fraction of the cost of store-bought shelves, the kinds of things that you get at Home Depot that you kind of bolt together or snap together. The assembly of this is so fast that it's actually easier than bolting ready-made stuff. I can custom make something easier and quicker than you can assemble a pre-made object. And I want to make one further point though about this. The rectangular steel tubing presents you with a surface like this that you can put two things together, and it makes a really nice place to lay a bead. And it's flat. If you get round tubing, not so good.
There's only one tiny point of contact between two round things that go together. Okay.
Exactly. So we stock this by the ton here, and we build everything with it. We build bridges, we build shelves, we build tables, if we need to build any kind of structure, we can throw it together so much faster with this because of that little simple joint right there.
Well, and even though the steel tubing is more expensive than, say, lumber, what you told me is that when you factor in the cost of labor of doing everything together, you end up more or less the same price, right? With the steel tubing versus the 2x4s.
Well, and actually it's probably not all that much more expensive, if any, depending on what you're doing. If I build a table out of this stuff, it's really sturdy, and I can pick it up and walk around with it because it's so lightweight. I do the same thing with 2x4s and other kinds of lumber, and it's a monster, and then you use it, hammer on it for a while, and it's creaking, and it's all this thing. We have these tables here that we built that they're so much nicer. There's really no comparison. Easier to build, sturdier, lighter weight, last forever.
So what we're going to talk about today is welding. This gluing metal together is welding, right?
Yes.
And you're going to show us what you did to build these shelves and a bunch of other stuff, and let's just get right into it. Before we talk about specifics and what you should go buy if you're going to want to learn how to weld, what's the basic theory behind this whole process?
Well, welding involves a piece of metal that you're going to weld on.
Okay.
And an electrical arc.
Okay.
Now, the old school version is called stick welding. It's like this thing, and you put a ground onto the piece that you're going to weld on.
Okay.
And then you have the other end of your electrical circuit hooked up to the stick in this case, and you touch it to that, and you're welding.
And it gets incredibly hot, and then some of this material will move over to there while it's molten, and then the two things that we're touching are permanently bound at that point.
Yes. The only other thing that is really key here is that when you heat metal up to where it's melting like that, it'll absorb nitrogen from the atmosphere, and that makes for a very porous and poor weld. It doesn't work. It's very splattery and it's ugly.
Okay.
So what they do is they shield the welded area until it cools off, and you can do that either by flooding it with a gas, or you put in the case of this, which is old school stuff, we use these a lot, but for coarser things and generally outdoors where there's wind and you can't contain the shielding gas. But this coating on this stick, as the stick melts from the arc, the coating also melts over it and forms a glass-like coating that protects the weld and keeps it from absorbing nitrogen. So, but the most common thing, that nowadays, the cheapest and easiest thing to use is literally like a hot glue gun.
Okay.
And that's these over here. It's called a MIG welder, and that stands for metal inert gas. And in that case, if you have your piece of metal grounded and you've got your MIG gun, the MIG actually feeds this wire out of the tip of it.
Oh, so you don't have to worry about that?
No.
Okay.
And it also, because of this cupped end, you're pumping the shielding gas out of this, which protects the weld. So it's like this all-in-one nifty little thing, and all you do is go pull the trigger and bzzz, you're welding.
So it actually is like a hot glue gun.
It's literally a hot glue gun. People are afraid of welding because you got to wear a mask, you got to wear gloves, and you got to have a special equipment. But the thing is, welders like this one here, you can pay thousands of dollars for them, but you can also pay like a couple $100 and get a cheap one. And that's what I did when I first learned how to weld. Was I just went to the store and bought one and hooked it up and started welding, because it's literally you pull the trigger and you're welding. Now there are a lot of finer subtleties about it that will allow you to get better over time, but these are our go-to means of attaching things together, because it is literally like, it's like glue that dries in a fraction of a second.
Right.
The minute that you're done gluing it.
So one of the cooler welders you have that you said you use a ton is this little battery-powered guy that you can take on boats and stuff like that where you don't have power.
Yeah, these are new. This one's made by Hobart. Hobart sponsors us, so we have all Hobart stuff, and I don't know if anybody else makes this type of thing or not, but this is like a suitcase. It's a heavy suitcase, but it's got a lithium battery in it, and it's all self-contained. Now can
you take this on the plane with you?
Well, I doubt that, but you've got your the same basic things.
Okay.
You've got your plug-in cord, because you can just plug this into the wall and use it that way. But you've got your ground, and you've got your MIG gun. And what happens is when you put this onto your piece of metal that you're gonna weld on, and you hold you put your mask on and you hold the trigger down, or you hold the gun against the metal and you pull the trigger. What's happening is that that inside this thing, the battery's behind here, but this is a spool of wire that gets fed into this tube that comes out the end here.
Okay, and it's just pushing it through.
Yeah, and in the case of this particular one, because it's so portable, we generally use it with a flux core wire. Even though it's a skinny little wire, it's got a small amount of the flux, the same as what's on a stick welder, but it's inside the wire.
Okay.
And so when you're welding, that flux is floating on the top of the weld and melting across it and protecting the weld from nitrogen.
So you don't have to have argon or
Yeah.
whatever here. And do you have to chip this flux off at the end or no?
Well, if you're doing multiple passes, you might, but with these, it's actually such a small amount because it's so controlled, and that it's not a problem. It's not a very massive thing. But I just love these things because you can go up on if you've got to go up on a scissor lift or something like that, and like if I'm welding these shelves, I can just have it with me. I can plug it in or not plug it in. It runs, depending on how much you're welding, it'll run for a good half hour or something like that before you have to recharge it. So for quick fixes, like if you were a serious off-roader, for example, you might want to have one of these in your vehicle.
In case you break something on the car that would otherwise require getting a tow truck out in the middle of nowhere.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So you said you learned by just going out and buying a welder and kind of mucking around with it in your shop.
Yeah, you can read the manual. You plug it in and you turn it on. You do have to wear some safety equipment, though. You generally should wear gloves, although a lot of times I don't because I'm okay with the pain.
Okay.
But you need a mask like that one over there.
These guys. It also doubles for eclipses, right? So you can look straight at the sun with that guy.
Sure, if you want to. One of the things that also makes this a lot easier than it used to be, in the old days you had this mask and you put it on, you couldn't see anything unless you're welding, so you kind of had to feel your way around in the dark, which is a pain in the butt. With these have there's a button on the inside that you push on to turn it on, and it has an auto darkening thing, and it senses the light coming off from the weld, and before that light can blind you, it darkens the shield.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so you can actually have this on and be looking at the, you can look right at the object and see it without any external light, to help you.
So you don't have to keep flipping your visor up and down as you go.
And it'll just darken when you need it to be dark.
Okay, well, let's try it out.
Okay. Assume it's on.
Look away.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That looked really easy.
Yeah. It literally, again, is just like hot glue. Now, generally, where the subtlety comes in is that you kind of want to lay the weld down in a pattern. You'll see people sort of weaving back and forth.
Okay.
And so to get a really nice, neat-looking weld, it has some practice, but it's pretty much just doing what I just did and playing with it until you get it right.
That is a real hot piece of metal, Jamie. Let's look at one more thing that you've built with welding and the square tubes. I want you to show off your tables.
Okay.
So Jamie, when you first showed me the secret of these tables, I was really blown away. It's a really neat piece of design. They're steel tubing, just like we for the shelves, 1-inch steel tubes.
Yeah, and they're lightweight.
Yeah, you and I can lift it. It looks really heavy, but the wood probably weighs more than the metal at this point.
It does, actually. It's not exactly, like fancy, but all you have to do is you pull off a couple of screws.
They nest.
They nest. And so this works, we have these narrow tables that we like, and I put these together because, they're just wide enough when you're working on them, like you can reach everything.
Yeah, it goes good against the wall table for just general workshop use.
Yeah, if you make it out of a 4x8, you can't, sometimes you need a larger work area, but you can't reach all of it. Mm-hmm. And just like I said, sometimes you need a large work area. You can have, if you have a 4x4 tabletop surface, which is a typical bench, then you do this to it with this nesting thing, and you've got 8 feet square, which is a huge table, and sometimes that's what you need. Like we pull these out in particular if we're doing stuff with fabric. You need that large table space.
Because you got to keep it flat while you're working. You don't want to work on the floor.
I can practically fill this whole room with table surface.
So this is just 10 pieces of tube welded in a few places, and then there's another frame that's just like it, but with the extra sides. You left off 2 sides, and because it's steel, it's rigid enough that it doesn't wobble.
Again, I can put together something like this literally in a few minutes, mm-hmm. and it's just hot glue together. We also, by the way, with this steel tubing, we use tools that are, like chop saws. They're almost like wood saws. DeWalt makes one that we use. It's not terribly expensive, and it just has a blade with more teeth on it, and it rotates a little more slowly, so it's fine for cutting. It's made for cutting metal.
Jamie, thank you so much for showing us around the shop and showing us a little bit about welding today and the awesome tables and shelves.
My pleasure.
There's a whole bunch more to learn about welding, obviously.
Yeah, they're all different kinds of welders. They're all kinds of different techniques. Some of them fall into the same category as the MIG welding, like plasma cutting in particular. It's another one of these guns, and you can literally hold a ruler on the piece you want to cut and just go zip, and it, it's cut. That and MIG welding, it just makes all of this stuff so easy and accessible for anybody that has a shop that wants to make stuff needs to have one of these kinds of stuff.
It's worth learning how to do.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We'll be back with more from Tested soon. I'm Will.
I'm Jamie.
See you guys later.